BI user group in Auckland, but when it's run virtually, it is pretty much like everywhere. Organizers of these is normally me, David, Layla, and Indra. At the moment, David and Layla are busy with a lot of other things, so it's me and Indra, and I'll be also off in a few minutes, so it will be pretty much like Indra helping on this. Our speaker, Treb, has massive experience in Power BI, of course, and before that, SharePoint. I think that is where your prior experience.
Yeah, SharePoint and project actually.
Nice.
Actually was a program manager at Microsoft on the Power BI team as the BI PM, which is how I got my start with all this. I'll talk more about that in a moment.
That is good. So here is Treb, currently MVP, ex-PM on Microsoft. So yeah,
greetings, everybody.
All I wanted to say.
Okay. You're good?
Handing over to
Any more announcements? Do you have any other announcements for upcoming meetings?
Oh, just one thing. Power BI Summit coming up around the corner, not far away. If you haven't checked it out, go and check it out, and registration is still open. That's pretty much.
Please attend. It's going to be a great event.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like we got a bunch of people coming in. Excellent. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to try to do my best to make this session one of the best you've ever been to. And part of that is I'm going to ask you to ask me a lot of questions along the way. So I'm monitoring the chat. I have that up. If you have something you want to talk about, please put it there. I'll try to refer to those. I'll also stop along the way and ask you, is this making sense? Do you have any questions, that kind of thing. And again, today we're going to be talking about Power BI Goals, which is I can't really say new feature anymore because it's been out for a while, but it is a recent feature. And myself, we've been involved with the Power BI Goals feature as part of the private preview. So I've actually been using it almost a year now. And it's been exciting to see this feature come to life and and finally be released. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Treb Gatte. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Marquee Insights. We are based in Seattle, USA, very near to Microsoft. In fact, I'm looking at the Microsoft building across the street right now. And we essentially help companies establish their, I can't use data culture anymore because I've been ranting about that a bit, but we help them use their data to inform their learning and their actions. And so we've been doing this since 2013. Myself, I'm a Power BI MVP. Previous to that, I was an Office MVP. Prior to that, I actually worked at Microsoft. So I've been in this space for a while. We did a lot of work with healthcare and construction and tech companies, particularly. I've written a lot of books because, frankly, I don't sleep that well. So I blog at night, I write at night, also do other stuff under pen names. And so anyway, I've been at this for a while, and we've seen a lot of interest in this particular function. Now, I'm going to talk about what are Power BI goals. So I'm going to take you through what was the thought process behind this feature. What are we really trying to achieve here that is different than what we can do with reports? I'm then going to transition and show you how they are being used. And I'm going to talk about how we're seeing some emerging developments that are different than what we've had in the past. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how are these different from KPIs? I'm going to talk about that. How is this different from health indicators? I'm also going to talk about how this is changing in this new, not even new now, 2 years of working remote and hybrid. There's some emerging practices, if you will, that I think are really helping this feature land with the executive suite. And finally, I'm going to go into a demo where I'm going to go through the process of creating a scorecard, creating goals, connecting it to data. I'm going to update the settings and show you where that is because it's a bit hidden. And they've heard this already. There's also some status rules. We can set up automated status rules. And then we're going to talk about check-ins, which I think are really the special feature of all of this. And throughout all of this, again, if you have questions, please either post in the chat or when I get to my stopping points, raise your hand and I'll answer them at that point. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and go to what are Power BI goals. So Power BI goals are really focused on where are we going as an organization instead of what are we doing. Now, if you think about it this way, so I had a meeting this morning with the marketing team, and they were looking at Power BI goals for the first time, and they had all of these reports. In fact, they have 52 reports that they have to look through to try to figure out what's going on. And I basically asked, what is one of the key things that you are concerned with? And they said conversion rate from the time we start contacting a potential client to the time they sign the dotted line. You know, what's our percentage? What's our win percentage? And I'm like, that is a goal, because you going into a fiscal year, going into a quarter, that sort of thing, you should set a target of, say, I want to convert, 5% of the people we contact into a paying client. And from your reporting, you could see that we're at 4.69%. Okay, then you can clearly see where you stand, and you can then drill into the reports. And so the focus of goals is really higher level, where we're going, not where we are, and then how do we give the context to these numbers as you're going along. So some of the things that you'll see here is, I call it the top line view. We're really looking at, from an executive level, senior manager level, what are those key things that they need to pay attention to? And I see this problem pretty much everywhere, including Microsoft, by the way. I had a discussion with the director at Microsoft where I was in a meeting, and they were basically going, oh, wait, we have a report that tells us that. And then they proceeded to look through, like 40 reports looking for the answer. And I'm going, if this happens more than 3 or 4 times a week, that's an expensive search. And unfortunately, because Power BI has made it so easy to create reports, we're now creating reports faster and more than ever, and we're actually compounding the problem. So this takes us back to, what is it that we really want to focus on? And so the summary that you see here, this scorecard here, is essentially hosting a number of goals. And what we're seeing is usually the top line, you could have up to 5 levels of hierarchy in a goal. Let me just start with that. And what we're seeing is that a lot of companies will have different time frames based on where the goal is in the hierarchy. So in this case, we had, for the fiscal year 2021, they want to increase their current margin. Fine. Under that, they have current margin for distributors, and they added others after this. But they were basically tracking, how is this progressing through the year? And so as you're looking at the goal, you see there's an owner. You can have up to 5 of those. You have a status, which I'm going to talk more about that from a signaling perspective instead of a health indicator. You have the value, the current value versus your target. You have the progress line, so you can see this trending over time. You have the due date, which essentially is the end of the time frame that the goal is effective for. And then you have the notes feature, which is the check-ins, which I'll go much deeper into. But you can see below here that the second level, they did quarterly goals. Because again, if you have an annual goal, it's kind of like me, oh, I want to lose 25 pounds. If I set it for the entire year, we're going to be rolling into November, and I'm going to be going, yeah, I may have lost 5. So you got to have those intermediate checkpoints to really make sure that you're progressing as you hoped. And so they actually started breaking it down quarterly. Then under that, they said, let's go to region. And then they said to city. And we actually prototyped a person, and they went, we don't really want to go that far down. But you could, if you had this type of hierarchy. But again, this is just one example. And you could have any number of ways of doing these types of scorecards. And that's the other thing too, is, it's not like the Lord of the Rings. You don't have to have the one scorecard to rule them all. You can have a constellation of scorecards. And so we're seeing that as well, depending on what you want to track. You could have your enterprise scorecard, you could have your department scorecard, you could have your team scorecard, and then you can have individuals. And I'll talk about the individuals in a bit here. One of the nice features of goals is that you can actually scroll through and see the history of the goal right here within the interface. And this is usually something that comes up in a lot of meetings. It's, well, what was it last week? What was it the week before? What was it last month? Now we're capturing that information here. You can quickly see, oh, we've gone from red to yellow to green. Okay, that's good. And I don't have to go off and ask a bunch of questions, hit people up on Teams, that kind of thing. It's a very efficient interface, at the same time being as simple as they could make it so that we can increase adoption. The other piece of this is really check-ins. And the intent here is that a lot of times when we are giving updates on numbers, you have to have the human there to explain why this is what it is. And that's not very effective when we're working in a remote situation, because you don't know what time the person's going to be looking at this. You don't want them pinging you on Teams at 7 a.m. in the morning going, I don't remember what this number is, and having to have that back and forth. You'd rather capture that conversation once and reuse it everywhere. And so this is the intent of the check-in. And what we're seeing is that people are actually looking at their current status reports, and they're saying, you know what, we could actually use this feature to incorporate our status reporting directly on the metric that we're tracking. And that way, when I go back and look at last week or the week before, I can actually scroll down and look through all the statuses. So it's not only just the metric history that we can get, but we can actually get the history of the context right here within the interface. And I really think this is the one feature I'm very excited about. Now, as much as I like goals on the web, the mobile team has done a phenomenal job with mobile, the mobile version of goals. I think it looks better on the phone, actually, than it does on the web because of all the styling and whatnot. But as you can see here in the little video I've got, all the same features are there. I can see the goals that matter to me, those metrics that I'm going to be using to make my decisions. I can see the check-in information. I can see the history. Everything is right there at my fingertips. And then at this point, I stop and ask a question. Does all that make sense? Is that intro help you at least understand what was the intent here? I'll look for the chat, see if there's anything. I'm guessing we're good. Everybody's giving me the thumbs up, so I'm guessing we're good. Okay. So again, think this was really designed for primarily for executives, senior managers, as a summary. And it can also be used as we go through the setup as a starting place. So this could potentially replace some dashboards. And we'll talk more about that in the usage here. All right, so how are companies actually using the scorecard and goals functionality? So we're seeing three major patterns emerge. Most of it is due to the fact that with COVID isolation, we're working remote, we're working hybrid. The old ways of ensuring people are working in the same direction aren't really working that well. They aren't scaling. And so we're seeing a lot of management teams revisiting what I call older management frameworks and using goals as a way to implement those. One of the primary ones we're seeing is something called OKRs, or objectives and key results. This one has been around for a very long time because it actually started before Google was here. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about that in a moment. So we're seeing that one as a way to ensure that we've got alignment between all of the levels of management and the teams to ensure that they're actually working toward a specific goal. We are also seeing people using it to monitor metrics. So think of it as a different way to measure their KPIs in that fashion. So we were talking with a large customer service organization, and one of the metrics they monitor is the average wait time on their phone calls, for the help desk kind of thing. And so they can clearly see this information because, again, that model in the background is just, updating on a fairly continuous basis. And in fact, you can actually hook a goal to a real-time data set. I won't see that anywhere in the documentation, but it will work. And it'll automatically update as well. And so you could actually use it to say, okay, here's our wait time, here's the current number of people sitting out on, waiting, that kind of visualization. If you needed to do that, you could use a scorecard and goals to do that. The third thing we're seeing is a lot of experimenting because, again, this is a slightly different way of looking at your BI from what you've seen in the past, where, we're used to graphing and charting and whatnot, and now we're asking people to have some commitment because, here we have a target, we have an actual, and you're being measured against it. And so we're seeing a lot of companies now starting to think about can we do this at the personal level? So I was talking to this lady, Olga, who is in Canada, and for her company, they're actually implementing employee level scorecards. These are not, absolutely not tied to salary in any fashion, because we know if we do that, nothing will ever be read, because, you know, nobody wants to threaten their own salary with what they're doing. But they're doing it as an experiment to see if they can get better results out of people by getting them to commit to certain goals and then seeing how they achieve them. So it's sort of a flavor of OKRs, but not quite as rigorous. And we're seeing, we have another company in California here in the States where the program manager for one of the major initiatives, they're spending $1 billion on this program. It's a really big effort, multi-year effort. And she's actually using this for her program status, where she has the key deliverables in one section, she has some key metrics in another section, she has some quality metrics, and then some progress updates. And all of this is being managed in a goal and scorecard scenario. It seems to be working quite well for her because, again, she loves that check-in feature where she can just basically put in all of that status report information, and there's one place for everybody to go see it. So we're seeing some, you know, some interesting things here. OKRs, I think, are probably the biggest. So if you haven't seen Measure What Matters, if you haven't read this at some point in your career, it's a good read. I would strongly suggest, you know, taking a look at it. It's definitely not, you know, BI related, but it is measurement related. And the idea here is that if you focus on what you're trying to do, then all your work will align to that. And so OKRs originated actually at Intel a long time ago. And this is where John Doerr learned it. He worked for, of course, right now, when I want to say the guy's name, it's escaping me, but he learned it there. And then he became an angel investor for this new company called Google. And he's like, you know, this really worked well for us at Intel. So we're going to help you implement this at Google to ensure that you stay focused on what you need to be focused on and hit those goals. Now, something about OKRs that's interesting is that you actually have to, or they suggest you create a failure budget, if you will. The intent is not to have green across the board, because if you do, you're not being ambitious enough, you're not experimenting enough. And they want you to really push, you know, the envelope here. And so the other piece of this is that OKRs are completely open to everybody in the organization, so you can see what others are working on. This trend is becoming so big again. It's kind of funny because, again, this was like 20 years ago, but, you know, what's old is new again, that Microsoft recently bought this company called Ally.io, which is an OKR software. You know, they do the really heavy duty implementing OKRs from stem to stern, and you're going to have all these features and functionalities. And this is going to become part of the Viva suite of products. Now, Ally is a great tool. I've used it before. It's a heavy lift, though. I mean, you use Ally when you are ready to go seriously into OKRs. And a lot of people are just change fatigue at this point. You know, it's like there's so much going on. It's like, I can't deal with another big implementation of something. I need something lightweight, something easy that I can do, and also something I can easily change my mind around very quickly. And that's where goals is coming in. And that's why a lot of companies are saying, you know what, we've already got this Power BI license. Let's use goals for this initially. Let's see if it works. And so it's some of the experimentation that's going on. And then if this succeeds, and, you know, as people grow up the maturity scale, this is where I can see that merging off into, you know, the Ally product that, you know, that Microsoft's going to offer, because I would assume they're going to work together at some point, and it'll be a natural transition. But right now, it's a heavy lift for a lot of companies to do this. And again, like with any tool, you can misuse goals to do all the wrong things if you're not careful. The other thing, if you are thinking about OKRs or you've never heard of them, but you're curious about it, one of the things about doing it successfully is frequent discussions around these. So they talk about SMART goals and fast goals. Fast goals actually work better in this case. So frequently discussed, they need to be ambitious. You know, you can't necessarily put out a goal that you're absolutely going to hit. You want to push the envelope. In fact, the story that John Doerr tells about YouTube is fascinating, about how they failed so many quarters in a row to achieve their goals. And then when they finally hit it, it was such a cathartic experience that's like, yes. And then it's kind of like, now what? You know, then you got to set the bar higher. And that's the other thing too, is it has to be very specific, has to be measurable and then transparent, because everybody needs to know about it. So again, these are all things that you can do within goals. And I'll talk about the permissions model as well, as to how you can enable people to do check-ins without being able to edit your scorecard, that kind of thing. This is another example. This is that customer service organization that okay, Gary, I'll get to that in a moment. So this is basically based on information that's going to be coming from ServiceNow, essentially. And if you look at what they're tracking from a customer service perspective, it's not, you know, how many customers did we serve? It's how many negative response rate? What's our negative response rate? What's our customer satisfaction score? One of the other interesting learnings that we've had with goals is that you should always have some sort of quality, you know, goal with it. So in this case, they had a customer satisfaction score. We started digging into that, and they said, oh, it's 94%. Okay, that sounds awesome. But then I asked the question, so how are you gathering this information? They said, well, we send out a survey. And I said, what's the response rate on the survey? 4%. How good do you think that number is? Probably not very accurate. And so when you're looking at your goals, one of the things you need to also incorporate in the design is not only what is the thing I'm tracking, but what is it dependent on that I can actually trust this number? Because if I don't have that additional context, chances are people aren't going to trust it. They're not going to pay attention. They're not going to use it. And now we're back to where we started. So this is a lesson that we've learned along the way. Trust with any of this stuff is a huge, huge blocker. And if people don't feel like they can trust the information, they just simply won't use it. This is a real life example of a CEO's scorecard. So Bill, who runs a manufacturing firm here in the States, was having a moment one night. We were going out to dinner, and he's like, look, I am so sick of sitting through an hour-long meeting, being PowerPointed to death, trying just to figure out what it is that they want me to do. And we started talking, and the CFO's there, and this was the stuff that he cares about. It's like margin and revenue. That he and the CFO, they're all over that. What's the forecast for next quarter? Well, this goes to the sales organization. He needs to understand, you know, what's the pipeline look like? Supply chain incidents. Well, if you're in manufacturing these days, that is big for everybody. In fact, they had stuff that was on the boat stuck in the Suez Canal there for a while. So they were very worried they were going to run out of supplies. Productivity index, which I found fascinating. They were actually looking at, because they did time tracking, how much time people were spending on keep the lights on type activities as opposed to doing the other work. And so they created a productivity index that they had a target for so that they could try to keep those kilo tasks down as much as possible. Customer net promoter score, how happy are the clients, you know, and then employee engagement, how happy are our internal folks. And then the last thing was safety incidents. And this is what he cared about. However, and this is one of the more interesting things that has been emerging as people are using scorecards, is the status indicator. In the past, we've always used red, yellow, green indicators to indicate health of something. And that worked great as long as we had maybe 3 or 4 things to monitor the health on. But now we've got 50 plus reports. We've got red, yellow, green indicators everywhere, and they don't mean the same thing on every report. Like what's read on report A is different from what's read on report L. And this creates confusion amongst the people that are consuming the reports. And I would love to take credit for this idea, but it wasn't me, but it was one of the folks I was working with around this. They said, how about we use this as a signaling to the executive, to the consumer, of how we want them to engage with the team that's reporting the goal. The beauty of this idea is that it's consistent no matter what perspective you're reporting on. Because if you use these simple rules, the person consuming it will always be very clear on what they need to know. And in Bill's case, like I said, he would walk out of a meeting and not really understand how he's supposed to help that team fix whatever problem they're having. And you're not exactly going to see your CEO, circle back and say, what was it you wanted me to do again? Yeah, that's not happening. So what they did is green means we are informing you that everything is okay. We're just letting you know, here's where things stand. We'll see you next week. If it's yellow, it means we need you to enable the team to unblock the problem that they're having. So it might be I need an approval or I need permission to go do something, but we just need you to enable the team will solve the problem. If it's red, this is where we need you to actually engage with the team. We need you to get involved directly because we're having such a serious problem, we're escalating it to you. And we've seen cases where, it's a vendor contract issue or there was a merger going on between a subordinate group. There was all kinds of weird things that have popped up. But again, the beauty of this idea was the fact that it is always consistent. And I love this idea. Right now, you're not able to edit the wording for these status indicators. I'm hopeful that at some point in the future they will enable that. But that's how we're implementing this, because it just simply makes it easier to communicate what it is that you need out of the person that's consuming the information. And Bill and the CFO love the idea. They went with it, and so I've been very happy with that. Actually, this is a repeat. We've already seen this one, so let's go on. And Gary, you were saying you use Azure DevOps for these with Power BI over the top. Again, you can certainly do this sort of thing. You can visualize the goals and you can visualize the progress toward it. I'm hopeful that when you start to see some of the other features in here, that you might see a use case for it. So again, I'm not going to sit here, because I am sitting, and tell you this is the greatest thing, and it should be used all the time for everything. It is another tool in the toolbox. If you haven't already made an investment in something like this, this might be a good alternative. One of the other things that Microsoft did for us, without really announcing it, by the way, when goals came out initially, it was a premium only feature. And, everybody was like, this is great, but I don't have premium. It doesn't really help me much. Now, if you're Office 365 E5, or you have Pro, because E5 includes a Pro license, you now have access to goals. So if you didn't know that, you can actually go ahead and start playing with it. Free license, folks, well, you need premium for that, but otherwise, you're good to go. All right, so let's go over to the demo here. So I'm going to reshare my screen, and if I'm lucky, this will work. There we go. So what you're looking at here, I'm just going to show you a scorecard initially so you can get an idea of what you're looking at. I did this as sort of a joke at one of the other user group meetings. I said, you know what, with all the weight I've gained through COVID, I'm going to run a marathon. Everybody's like, ha, 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 yeah. And I sort of went, yeah, that's the same thing. But let me take you through the idea. And the idea was, okay, I'm going to give myself a year. I'm going to run a 26-mile marathon. Still thinking, yeah, that's not going to happen. But if I broke it down, then quarter one would be, I'm going to run 3 miles. So that's my objective. My goal is to run the marathon. My objective is to run 3 miles first quarter. My key results are basically, am I running per week? How long am I running? Notice it's a quality metric. And then what's my average distance, so that I'm sort of looking at this from different pivots. And I have different statuses. So one of the nice things that they've done here is that at the top, you see these roll-up totals. But what may not be obvious is that, if I click this, it's a filter. If I do control click, I can filter for both of the things that I really care about, which is what am I behind and what am I at risk on? Because you remember, if you go back to that engage, enable, inform model, the engage and the enable are really the two things I want to pay attention to. So I can easily filter for this very easily. But if you start to look across here, so I can see what my current value, what my target is. I can see I'm trending up, but I'm still red. So what's going on here? So at this point, I can click the notes and I can scroll down. And in this case, I do speak Latin. No, I'm just kidding. I did take it, but I don't remember any of it. But again, you could put in quite an update in here. In fact, I have pasted in 5 full Word pages, as an update into a check-in, and it works beautifully. So again, I've got the ability here to scroll back through all of the check-ins, and you can decide, do I want a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly, or an annual check-in on a goal? You have the ability to set that. And then here I have the chart. If I go up to the history, this is where I can see, oh, there were 3 check-ins, and then we've had 100% change from the first one. Yet we're still behind on our target. So it's just something to look at. If I need to move these around, I can simply drag them around if I'm in edit mode. And again, very simple, very basic. Notice this one. So when I hover over it, remember I said earlier that you can almost replace a dashboard with this? If you link a goal to underlying data, which is one of the modes you can use it for, and I'll show you how to do this in a moment, it creates this icon here, which when you click it, will actually take you, if I had it on the right page, okay, but it actually takes you to the underlying report where you got the data. And so it's just something, it's a different way of looking at your information. And what I'm seeing is that if you were just starting in your Power BI journey, it may actually be more effective to start using goals first to understand what are the metrics that people really care about. What are those metrics that matter that drive decision making? Then once you flesh that out, then you can determine what reports do I need to write to support these goals? And then what data do I need? And so you wind up actually having much better alignment from top to bottom. It's an interesting concept. So I don't know, we'll see how people react to that over time. And by the way, I'm showing this in Teams. I don't know if you noticed that. We've actually seen, even though you can do this through the Power BI, app and see everything through here, you can also create a tab. In fact, we have a team specifically that we can, have some goals in here that are specific to this team kind of thing. So really, you have a number of ways that you can implement this. All right, let's go back. Actually, I'm going to cut over to my browser here. If I can get to it. Come on. It's not working. Oh, it's because it is working. It's just on the wrong screen. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go over here to goals. The goals hub here, which you can get to from the little trophy that's on the left nav, is intended to show you those goals that you own. So everything that shows up at the top here, with the exception of the samples, are things that I own and need to update on occasion. So if I click on this, it'll take me to the underlying scorecard for that particular goal. At the bottom here, you have your recent, you have your favorites, shared with me, and all scorecards. So anything you have access to, you would see under here. These are objects in a workspace, just like a report. In fact, if I go here to the workspace, you will see a data set created, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and then the scorecard itself. So you have the ability to manage this just like you would with other reports, with one exception. If you're using deployment pipelines today, you can't do this with goals. So just something to be aware of. If you're looking to start, doing a production implementation of this, this is where we're seeing people create a workspace, and usually for a specific fiscal year, because at some point they're going to archive this whole thing. And so they're creating a centralized model, one workspace for the fiscal year, everything's in here, and then they start to roll it out from there. Again, there's many ways that you can do this, but that is one way you can do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new scorecard. Now, you could do this directly from the workspace, or you can do it from here. I'm going to do it from here. You're going to give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to say my lovely scorecard, because I haven't used that name before. You want a description. This is my description. And sensitivity labels. So if you are using, say you have Office 365 and you're doing records management and you've set up, things like these are high business impact, medium business impact, low business impact, or you have, other labels like that set up, you can actually apply that to these goals. The reason being is you're probably going to have some very open and honest conversations in the check-ins. So you want to ensure that this information is tagged appropriately so that it doesn't accidentally leak out. Especially, if you're having a product development team using this, where they're talking about what's going to be in the marketplace 3 years from now, this is probably going to be very sensitive information. In this case, I'm going to create it in a premium workspace. You could create a workspace if you have rights. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and create. And this is going to create my lovely scorecard that has absolutely nothing on it. At this point, you can go ahead, create a new goal. And I'm going to say, let's see, I'm going to have, I'm going to do 2022. And I'm going to talk about, we will, and 20% of deals pitched. Just throwing that out there. Then under owners, so I can have up to 5 owners, because one of the things that Microsoft found is generally there is a lot of partnership going on within organizations. So it could be that you have your IT lead, you have your marketing lead, your sales lead, your HR person. It really depends on who needs to be in here. So in my case, I'm going to put Naomi on here, not her, because that's a different Naomi Waters, and I want Brian, and I'll just leave it at that. That's good. And so we've got these 3 we're the owners of this goal, and you can decide later who's going to manage the check-ins. So if I'm just starting out, I'm just trying to work through what needs to be on this scorecard, I can actually maintain this manually. There are 3 flavors, if you will, of how to maintain this. So in this case, I'm going to say we're going to win 20, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do 10. For 10 deals. So if you may not have noticed this, but when you click into this, you get this format tab. So I can just say, you know what, I want to do this. And just like you would in Excel, I'm going to say no decimals. And then my target is 100, just something like that. And we can go on about our business. We could manage this manually, update that current, every check-in period. And it's perfectly usable this way. It's much better than using Excel to manage this kind of stuff. For status, again, these are the fixed statuses at this point, so I can decide, I want this to be on track. I'll talk about setup rules in a moment. And then, of course, the date frame. So in this case, because this is a fiscal year thing, I want to set my values accordingly. So we'll do 12. I would do 12. Let's one more time. 31. There we go. So I've set this up for a full year. Now, if I go ahead and save, voila, I've got a goal, and I can start using it at this point. Now, let's talk about how I can make changes to this. So there's a few things that I would suggest you do. First off is go in, look at the details, and the first thing I want you to do is change the settings. So this is here, and the setting for this basically is setting what is your tracking cycle. So in this case, I want to track this weekly. And when I do that, I'm going to say, you know what, we do our updates on Thursdays. Now, why am I doing this? Well, remember that data set I showed you a little bit ago? This information will actually get written into that data set so that you could start to create reports and triggers over, hey, you haven't updated your scorecard yet. And there's some interesting stuff on the roadmap for Power BI goals you should take a look at as well. But again, it enables us to do a better job of making sure that the data is high quality, that we're not looking at data that hasn't been updated in 4 weeks kind of thing. And so this is a simple change to make. Now, what happens if I want to tie this information to data? How do I do that? Well, if I go back in here, I can simply click Connect to Data, just like this. I'm going to pick my Sales Analytics from Dynamics here. And this is going to bring up this report. Now, one of the interesting learnings about this is that if you're going to link your data to a goal, one of the things you should consider is what filters do you have on the filter pane? Because right now I can actually say, you know what, I want this to be true for the current month. And I could set my filters here, but only on the filter pane. But then I can then link to this number here. And once I connect it, notice my value is updated here. And every time that report is refreshed, it will automatically update the goal. And you're thinking, that's pretty good. And that way, again, if I'm monitoring something, I don't have to refresh the goal. I can just have it automatically updated if I'm just looking at it online. And again, I can, this appears to be a bug at the moment. Oh, there we go. It's not, it's only, it shouldn't have a decimal. So again, not quite GA, but they're getting there. And I could do the same thing for targets. So sometimes targets are dynamic, sometimes they aren't, but I can also mix and match. So in this case, I want to leave the target as manual. And again, this will self-maintain itself. What would be really sweet, though, is if this thing would automatically update the status based on that current value. And so this is one of the things they added, I think this was back in December timeframe, is setup rules. And so if you go in here, I can create a rule that says, you know what, let's look at this. And I could say if the value, if the date, if the value change, for example, and then have a condition. And then I could say, greater than, less than, equal to. I can have it be a percentage of the target, or I can just have it be the value. So in this case, I'm going to say if the value is less than, and I'm just going to say 30 here. So I've already got this set as green, but I'm going to say if it's less than 30, I'm going to have it at risk. Otherwise, it goes green. Click Save. I close this. Really? Values less than, no, should be. It worked this morning when I did this. I don't know why it's not working now. Let's try this one. Less than or equal to. Save. Okay. Maybe I have to refresh the report. Oh boy. Okay. Well, I'm just going to bite the bullet here. Demo didn't work, but trust me, it does work. It will update automatically, and you can set up conditions in your rules here. So you can have compound rules. That's very easy. You can also set up completely different rules. The largest I've set up to date had 8 different cases that we were tracking because they had a quarterly goal, and there was one set of rules for the first month, one set of rules for the second month, and one set of rules for the final month. And that got to be a bit much to set up, but it worked. The other thing to consider too is that when you start looking at setting these up and you're setting up the hierarchy, it's not unusual to have about anywhere from 35 to 100 items when you finally build this thing out. So one of the things that Microsoft is doing is they're providing better API support. I'm hoping at some point we get the ability to just say save as, and so if I don't have to redo this thing every year, if I'm doing basically the same thing, just updating it, or using the same rules. There's some management things that they've heard very clearly that, as you start to scale this, you need to do that. So this is basically, the mechanics of how do I set this up. Now, when I do the check-in, oh, now it changed. Okay, I had to save it. Sorry, it didn't run until I saved it. Okay, so if I'm in read mode, I can actually go in here. See, I've got the connection to the report, but I can do a check-in. And so here I would have the date. So I'll do tomorrow. Actually, I'll do the 23rd, 24th. And I can't change this because this is being managed for me. And I can't change this because we're not there yet. Normally it'd fill this in for me. But I can put in all sorts of text here. And, I can have bold. I can have green. I could do, websites. There's, so if I highlight that, do this. So now it's clickable. Wait, did I do that? Okay, one more time. Sorry, there we go. So now that's clickable, so I can have a link to my own internal systems. I can do bulleted list in here, which is another thing. And so list. I think for most status reporting, this is sufficient. The only thing that we can't do in here that I found thus far is I can't paste in an image. And that's my one thing that I really wish they would fix. But now I can add that. The other thing too is if you're doing check-ins, be aware that you can have multiple check-ins on a given day. So because you have multiple owners, you could have actually each of the 3 do their own check-in for a given time frame. So it is, I think, pretty cool the way you can do this easily. Now, a couple other things to be aware of. If you're trying to do reporting off of this scorecard, so let's see, where's my A Lovely? Way too many things in here. Okay, so I'm just going to go to customer service team here, or I'll do this one. So data, we're familiar with the data set view. If we do creates from scratch, notice all the tables that you have here. So you have the values, statuses, scorecard, notes, and goals. Now, what will happen is you'll come in here and you'll do this, and you'll drag this over, and you'll go, there's no data. What's going on with that? What happens is, and I don't want to say that, is that this information in the goal is not actually stored in this data set. It's stored elsewhere. And if you want it to be used for reporting, you have to actually refresh the data set. So one of the things that I would do if I were setting up a new scorecard is actually go in and set up the underlying data set once it's created for schedule refresh. Once you do that, then you're able to go in here to Power BI desktop or wherever, do get data, come on. Not what I wanted, go there. Go to data sets. And you will actually see, like in this case, I have, my scorecards, do the create. And notice I've got all the same information, except in this case, I should have some information in there now. Come on, work. There we go. Ta-da! So again, there's a lot of stuff you can do here. The biggest thing to be aware of, though, is all that rich text you were typing in. It's in this body field. It strips all that out for you. So it leaves it formatted, but not really. So just be aware of that. That's a limitation. Another thing that you can do in the desktop is we now have the goals visual, scorecard visual. So not only can I put this in here, but I can connect to an existing. So I'll do the executive team here. One of the nice things about this is that it gives us the ability to change the look and feel. So if you don't like that putty color, if you're all about the blue, you could do that. If you wanted to change the goals themselves and say, you know what, I want pink and I want white, you can do that. And in fact, there's already theme support for this on the JSON themes. I'm not sure if they've actually released it yet in the documentation, but it is coming. And so it does give us a way to stylize this. You can also turn things off, like if I don't want the header, if I don't need the column headers, I can get rid of all that stuff and use this within my existing reports. If you do have the headers, one of the other things you can do is you can actually, you have to do this in the scorecard itself, you can actually hide columns. You can so if you're in edit mode, like here, you can go in here, do show hide columns. You can move them around. So if I want owners back, do that, apply. And so again, you can really customize it. The last thing I want to touch upon, make sure I've got time for questions here, is the permissions model. So when you're in a goal, if you click the gear here, there is a permissions here. There are some basic ones that are in here already, like view all and update all. You can set up these to do check-in only. So in this case, you can basically say, I only want you to be able to check in on a particular check-in. So if I were editing this one, so I don't want to delete that. Okay, there we go. And so I'm saying Naomi Waters here, she can basically, right now she could do select all, but if I said, unselect all, and you can only do Q1, I have to do this one. So I could say, you can view these two, you can do the status on this one, and you can do the check-in on this one and this one. Then she would be limited to just those. And again, this is preventing her, like I'm saying, you can't update anything because we don't want them to edit the scorecard. Now, that said, there is, if you have edit rights, if you're a contributor or member of the workspace, right now you get edit rights by default. So this is something, again, they've gotten feedback on. They know it's an issue for some implementations. Just be aware of this, that there's a potential way that people can edit the scorecard. Hopefully they're going to fix this soon. Alrighty, I think that's everything. I think I've shown you everything. Let me go back to Teams here to make sure I've got questions, or I'll stop presenting. And it looks like the chat's got stuff. Okay, so do you need just Pro or Pro with E5? Just Pro. Just Pro works beautifully, and it should be able to you should see the little goal icon in the left nav. You should be able to create a scorecard now in a pro workspace, and you should be able to start creating scorecards from there without an issue. And goals setting here are very similar to the SharePoint list view. Yes, they are. There is a lot of similarities there. In fact, I wish some of the JSON styling that we get with SharePoint Online, I could bring to goals, because I would like to have the little, pill icons and whatnot. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet, because they don't really have a way to let us inject the JSON. And I'm also hoping that we get better support for all of the check-in information. How many of you do Power Automate? Show of hands, or clap, or whatever you want to do through. So one of the things they have done is they've given us a full suite of actions in Power Automate. So if I go back to here and do flow and go to create, automated cloud, skip, because I'm not going to name this. Actually, I'm moving too fast for the UI. Can you tell? There we go. Go to Power BI. Notice the triggers. So it's almost like half the triggers now are goal related. So if a goal changes, if the value changes, if somebody adds or edits the check-in, or you've changed the owner, are the status changes. So imagine you've set up the goal with status rules. You've got a report that's supplying the actual and the target information that's being refreshed, say, every 15 minutes or something like that. If something changes and you've got the status rules that automatically update the status, now you can have a Power Automate script sitting on top of it that does the escalation process or the alert process. There's a lot of possibilities here. On the action side, we've got, you can do a check-in. You could add, excuse me, you can create a goal using Power Automate. You can create a scorecard as well. And so some of these, I've been trying to use to come up with an example, and I think there's some gaps. So please kick the tires on these, try to use them. One of the challenges that I've run into was I was trying to, basically create a script where I could read in a list of goals and then publish it to the scorecard. And it works great as long as you have one level, because to go to the second level, you have to have the parent ID of the one you're going under, and there's not really a good way to get that easily. So I'm hoping with this new multiple goals action here that maybe I can get the parent ID at that point, but that's going to lead, I think, to some interesting scripts here. But anyway, so that's that. And now, there it is. Stop presenting. All right, other questions, comments, philosophical statements? So I think we're right at time. How am I doing, dear?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you've gotten value out of this. Feel free to post questions here. Also, if you are on Twitter, and I'm going to leave the deck as well because, see, I had this up and I meant to leave this open, but I have a resource slide on here. So we've created a site, and if this will let me scroll, which of course it's not. There we go. So, yeah, here. So we actually got together with Mike Carlo from Power BI Tips, and we've got the Get Started with PowerBIGoals.com site. So if you go there, pretty much everything there is to know at the moment is there. I've got 2 new articles I've got to publish because there was some content put in the community that needs to be there. Every blog post we have on Power BI Goals is at this URL. And again, if you want to ask a question later, you can ping me on Teams. You can ping me on Twitter at tgatte, at tgatte, or at Marquee Insights. I monitor both. We're also on LinkedIn, so in case you're not always on Twitter, like I'm usually am with my phone, you can also go to our LinkedIn site and see anything that's new that's been published. We try to keep these, in sync. Liz, thank you. Yes, CFOs love goals. Let me just say they're one of my biggest fans for this feature. And yes, so thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure, and I'm hoping you get a lot of good information out of this. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help you.
Thank you, Treb.
All right, thanks.
Wonderful session. Yeah, it was a wonderful session. I hope everyone got something out of it. Yeah, good to have you in our Auckland Power BI user meetup group.
It's a lot of fun. Actually, I want to do it in person someday.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, if you could come down for the Definity, it will be good.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
Excuse me, so I have a question for this.
Yeah.
So this kind of the goals in the Power BI service. So my company have the premium workplace. I just checked. So seems like is this the background of the Power BI team created this is very similar to SharePoint because I see the conditional formatting very similar to SharePoint list. So how is that set up?
Yeah, it's one of the overall movements that you're seeing at Microsoft is they want to make things more similar from a user perspective, from a user interface perspective, because if you're using SharePoint already, and then I go over to Power BI, I shouldn't really have to relearn the UI. I shouldn't have to relearn where the buttons are. I should have the same ribbon. I should have the same experience. And so you're starting to see a lot of the UI elements, like, you know, the pills and whatnot, look very similar across the platform. I think they're just getting started. They're doing a lot of work internally. We're also a Microsoft vendor, so I get to see some of the stuff from the inside. But there's definitely a movement to try to make it easier for people to work across. So if you looked at Dynamics, if you looked at SharePoint and the rest of the Office suite, if you looked at a lot of the Power Platform, you're going to see this convergence over time toward a very similar look and feel.
Yeah, so yeah, also I see on the social media, lots of like people very good at the SharePoint. They can use some kind of the PowerShell, then they can make some lots of kind of very cool kind of icon or image, the different kind of conditioner and the coloring in the SharePoint list. So is that also possible in this kind of course if you know how to use that kind of the like JSON, some language?
Not yet. This is something we've been talking to him about because I'm trying to remember the lady's name. She's based in Germany, I believe. She has the red mohawk. I met her in person. She's really cool, but she does a lot with the JSON stuff for SharePoint. I really want that functionality in Power BI goals, and I will pass on this feedback that people really want that. They want the ability to be able to modify those indicators as needed. I don't know if you've gotten the new board view yet for, for SharePoint, but it's like, I kind of want that for goals as well, because, it's one of those things where it looks really nice. And, it's one of those things where, shoot, I'm trying to see how I could show you this. But if you haven't seen the board view, it is really nice. So yeah, here's the board view. And this is using those JSON formatting that you were talking about. It's like, I want goals like that. I want to have this kind of interaction with my goal board, So if I wanted to drag stuff around, I could do that. And this would be a different pivot. So it could be, oh, we're moving this from Q1 to Q2 kind of thing. And but again, it's a V1, it's anytime you're doing a brand new product at Microsoft, it's a lot of work to get this up and running. So I anticipate there are many, many good things to come. What I would strongly suggest is if you have feedback like this, either post it on ideas.powerbi.com. You can also post questions on the community.powerbi.com site, and they're monitoring that site as well. Those people from the product team. They need to see this feedback. So please, please, please post it somewhere so that I'm not the only one going, hey, we really need this. We need customer proof.
Yeah.
Maybe we should create some ideas.
Yes.
I am also just a newbie. I'm not very new because I just use the SharePoint as the database for the Power Apps. Then I learned also stuff from the SharePoint because Microsoft created very easy for the Power Apps to use. If you use the SharePoint, they have lots of kind of defaulted setup. You don't need to create anything. You can custom form everything. That's I feel the SharePoint is very quick to adapt once you have some kind of small project. If like the data set not very big. But
Right.
the reason I see that very similar to SharePoint, I think because SharePoint you can have different type of data. For example, attachment, the video, all this is the data. It's not just the numbers. So I think for this kind of goal, is that possible in the future? You can just have like a kind of the space. You can have different type of data here.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've done some work in Power BI around this. For example, if you're trying to say you have an image in your data library, in your document library, and you want to pull that into your report, if you use the image itself, it's too big. It's like Power BI will throw up all over itself. But there's actually a technique that you can pull the thumbnail that SharePoint generates automatically if you know how to get to it. And again, I used to work on that, work in Office, so I know some of the inside ways of getting to this stuff. But you can actually show that in your reports. And so in our construction projects, it's very helpful sometimes to have that. Here's what the room looked like. Here's what the site looks like. We've also trying right now to incorporate webcams and live video in some of these things. And again, we're still early on in some of these multimedia type ways of presenting data. I think it's going to get better, and I'm hoping at some point we can actually have three-dimensional models and such, just like we do in PowerPoint. I want that in Power BI as well. Because for construction,
I do see this have lots of kind of potential use case, because for my company is also SaaS company, so the OKR is already embedded in like the strategy. So every leader use OKRs, but we still use a very traditional way to build a point like then everyone go to there to change it every week, every month. I see this will be very cool. So everyone can directly get this. Also, you can get the subscription when you done everything. Just use the automator, then can give the approval that the manager can approve it, or to spread out.
There's a ton of possibilities here. So
yeah,
like I said, I want people to know more about this, because I think I want to see some of the solutions that people are building. And I've heard of one company, they've got a massive number of retail locations, and they're creating a small set of goals for every retail outlet. And they're rolling this thing. It's going to have like, I don't know, probably over 15,000 goals on this one scorecard. So imagine, we're rolling this up by, region and then by district, and, it's just going to be crazy. So they're also in the private preview. I'm waiting. I want to walk through what they're doing, because I want to see how they actually made this thing happen. Let's see, do you have any other questions? No, I think we're good. All right. Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The recording will be available soon. We'll be posting the recording.
And if you can send me a link, I'll help socialize it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All righty. Well, I guess, is this it? Do you have any more after me, or?
No, thank you. Yeah.
Links in the chat. Let me pull that up real quick. That's a great idea. Let's see if I get PowerPoint 2. Okay.
Yeah, for the Power BI tips, I see that they have the podcast. I see they talk about they have some kind of special topic about the scorecards. They already talked about it. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I don't know what the heck this thing just did, but it just pasted it for like full size. Let me put this in Notepad real quick so I can paste it. Where normal people can read it.
Links will go.
There we go.
Notepad, the links will go. Oh yeah, that's good.
Okay, that's better. Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So like I said, get started. We're going to keep up to date, and then I've got more blog posts coming for our site and some videos as well. So, all right, I think that's it. Yep. So thanks to everybody for coming. You really make doing these presentations worthwhile to see everybody here and asking great questions. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Treb.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I guess you'll have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Cheers.
All
Bye.
right. Thanks. Bye.
Good night. Treb.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. I'm leaving now, so talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.